without much ado, I'll get to our topic. This is improving legal literacy and consciousness in business. In fact, there was an incident or a news that I had read about more than a decade ago. That is when Aditya Ghosh was appointed the CEO of Indigo Airlines. And I saw a lawyer becoming a CEO. And that brought to my mind the importance of lawyers, not only at the GC level, but at the management level. While law has now become all encompassing, and you need a legal expert even to head companies. And you saw how wonderfully he ran the airline, and it emerged as one of the best low-cost carriers in the country, and even the largest by far now. So that being one point, of course, when you see legal literacy in business, another watershed movement were the 2G cases when licenses were cancelled. And the other was the coal block allocations when they were cancelled. When that happened, there dawned another set of realization that why legal knowledge at the top is very important, and why not only operations guys can't let alone be allowed to run companies. You need fine legal minds right at the very top. So before Meghna joins, may I request Mr. Zameer Nathani to lay the ground for our today's discussion in about 2.5 minutes about what he thinks on this topic. Then we'll go to Seema, who can take the thought forward. But Mr. Nathani, in about 2 minutes, you've seen a lot of corporates work. How the landscape has changed in the past decade or so.
Right. And thank you once again, everyone. And thank you to Business World BW Legal. What you said, Tarun, I passed through that stage when I was in Reliance. So I'm one of the witness of the examples you have given. So number one, what we were always trying to do from 2006 onwards is to convey a message to the government, to the companies or the management that, the legal should stop reporting to the CFOs because, there is no bridge between the two, because just because of the sake of formality of reporting, I think the reporting should be to the chief executive officer, because legal also is an independent function. So we have been vocal about it, and now we are seeing the trend that people report to the CEOs or the president, and including inclusion in the board membership also. So we were one of the crusaders of that. Number two, the examples you gave on the 2G licenses, I spent majority part of my life working for Reliance. So 50% of my career was in Reliance. And at every opportunity, we were trying to put agreements in place, compliances in place. We would see any abnormalities, we would try to address that directly, whether we were dealing with the biggest software companies in the world, or we were dealing with any private equity investor, etc. We would ensure that, the governance mechanism is in place. Number three, we were also propagating what example of Indigo you gave was in the United States. So in United States, where you are at a management level, and when you're becoming a CEO of the company, if you have a law degree or a law experience, you are one of the preferred candidates. So that was one of the trends in United States, because if a CEO becomes, if a legal guy becomes a CEO, he's consciously aware of the law. So whatever marketing you approve, whatever things you approve in the company, at least there is a sanctity to it. That was the approach in United States at that point of time. So these are the three basic grounds. I think the consciousness in the company has come in after 2008, when the financial crisis took place, because much of the companies in India said that we were affected by financial crisis, wherein there are certain companies, they had no relation to the financial crisis, but because the trend of the dollars was going down, the deals were going down. So this consciousness of 2008 then felt into 2012 when the 2G scam happened. And from there onwards, I am seeing a conscious effort on the part of the corporates to be in compliance, because it's about 6 months, 2 years, or 10 years down the line. Somewhere down the line, you are exposed. And if you have connectivity with the private equity investors in the United States, then you are also exposed to the investigation by SEC. So that's where the legal consciousness has come into businesses. That's my take on it.
Thanks for sharing that anecdote with us, Zameer. I'll go to Seema Jhingan at this point. Seema, recently, I had a longish meeting with the general counsels of one of the top companies in the country. He told me that every time the CEO wants a contract executed, the earlier GC was told to get the papers made. I asked for a meeting with the CEO to understand why we are entering into this contract. And I also voiced my opinion whether we should go ahead or not at all. So I asked him why. He says, because I understand the pitfalls of what word is being written and what impact will have it on my business. So I am not an extension of the execution strategy of the CEO. I am an equal partner who thinks for the company like a salesman, like an operations guy, like a business development guy, because legal has become very important. So I asked him, how do you do it? He said, I sit along with my law firm. We understand the business proposition. We understand what kind of contract the CEO has proposed and whether that is something which is in the interest of the company or we should scrap it. And I asked him, if you have scrapped some takeovers or some associations because of this. He said, yes, there have been incidents where we have decided to forego the contract with a partner because of that reason. Seema, because I shared this anecdote, could you also share how this whole ecosystem is changing in companies where legal departments have much more say in management also now?
Okay, thank you, Narun. Tarun, I will take a step back. I would say when we are talking about legal literacy or legal awareness, I am going to go beyond the legal department. The companies primarily are run, in fact, all of them are run by people. Now, a legally literate workforce is not only required in a legal department, it is required at the CEO level, it is required at every manager level who is hiring vendors, who is buying supplies, who is engaging into HR, into taking employees on board. It is required, this awareness, this consciousness, the consciousness of the law, general awareness of law is required in every sphere and every, I would say, speck of the company. Now, why is that? Let's step back. I'll come back to your question. Let's step back when we are doing, as a law firm, when we are doing a structuring of a deal. So the legal literacy starts, we're not sometimes dealing with just lawyers, we're dealing with managers, we're dealing with business heads, we're dealing with people who are decision-oriented people who has nothing to do with law, but have to be aware of the impact and the adverse impacts and the liabilities that will take by their decisions. So their decisions has a long-term impact on the health of the company and sustainability of the project that they're taking. So when it comes to, let's say, the heart of the Indian economy, is startup. We have SMEs, the largest SMEs in the world right now. It's the third largest sector that we have. Now, most of them don't have legal departments. That's why I want to bring in the legal consciousness in every workforce. Most of them that do not have legal departments. Legal departments are there in the larger sector. Now, when they are taking the first step of structuring their businesses, are they aware of the benefits available by the government? MSE, for example, MSME sector has a lot of benefits given by credit guarantee schemes, no debt, no interest rate, low interest rate schemes, a lot of other tax exemptions. Are they aware? So the structure, the legal awareness and consciousness starts from the structure itself. Have they taken the right structure? For example, if you're in a sector which requires a lot of licensing, are you aware of it? The second aspect, it goes to your employability. Are you taking the right decision when you're employing your workforce? Are you, as managers, you're doing the right contracts, you're doing the right compliances, excuse me, for your company? Third comes the contractual part of it. Every manager that a company has or a small startup has are taking decisions. Are you entering into lopsided judgments vis-a-vis the contracts? Are you taking contracts which are not protecting your rights, whether it's coming to liabilities or indemnification? And you don't need to be a rocket scientist here and a big law degree. You need to have general awareness of the implications that will have. Then protection of IP rights. Most companies, most SMEs, most MSMEs also, when we work with them, do not give any credence to the intellectual property rights that the company has. The real estates that they're entering into, the leases that they're entering into, it has absolutely, they just sign whatever is being given to. Vendor contracts, supplier contracts, all of them are lopsided. Then comes to the balancing of the rights of the employees and balancing on the sustainability of the business. Those are missing. Policies of the startups, policies of the SMEs, do you have anti-bribery policies? Do you have policies related to employees? Do you have policies related to sexual harassment? All of this is required because these are compliances which are required to be done. And most important, the compliances aspect. Now you've given references of 2Gs and other scams. They're at a higher level where the businesses are large and they have legal teams. These small companies do not have these facilities, and the decisions that they're going to take expose them to a lot of liabilities in the future, which they are not aware of. So therefore, when the topic is so interesting, legal consciousness, to my mind, the legal consciousness needs to go to every speck of the company's organization so that they're able to take the right decisions at every level. A workforce which is legally, literally, they're aware, they're aware not as a lawyer, but as a general awareness of the consequences is an asset to the company. And we have seen it all the time with our clients that what are the decisions they have taken are actually going to have a long-term impact.
Thank you, Seema, for sharing that viewpoint with us. I'll go to Meghna Mishra at this point. Seema brought in the point of smaller businesses. Now, we started with large businesses. Now, let us talk about mid-sized businesses. I recently had a conversation with the CEO who ran a chain of restaurants. And he told me that we need about 54 compliances and legal permissions to keep this going if we go by law. And we have to go by law because we run a chain, we are corporate, we are not a standalone restaurant. And I said, do you know about it? He says, because there were so many problems, I was forced to learn about each permissions, where it comes from. Though we have a law firm that helps us, but I had to know everything. So do you think legal literacy at the very top is also improving? And they realize, the managements realize that they also have to be legally aware and make their employees legally aware. Meghna, could you give your input on that? I mean, in the company itself, from the CEO level to the VP level, not the law department only.
So absolutely, Tarun. I think it just, it trickles down. And like Seema very rightly said, if the entire organization from the very beginning takes the correct step, what are the regulations, what are the compliances which are required, what are the pitfalls. In terms of IPR, you don't end up just taking something download something from the net, use it as your image. There are small things, because also what has happened is the entire scenario, there has been disruption, and also as a result, a lot of innovation. So I think what has happened is the way businesses are being conducted, that has also changed drastically. And MSMEs and startups, now the government is promoting and encouraging them. But in terms of, if you take a wrong step, the cost of correction in terms of not just the value, but also in terms of time. So if the management is aware and, typically, like you rightly said, the larger organizations have legal departments. You need not actually have a full-fledged department. You can have a consultant who can work with you. You can, at the beginning, hire a law firm. You can have a retainer system. You can have one person. You can periodically, there are a lot of things that you could build into your organization, but it must come from the top. And with the smaller organizations, definitely, because at every step, the decision making, the top people are entrenched in every step also in that sense. So if there is legal literacy from the bottom to the top or top to the bottom, I think it needs to be holistically done. And Seema mentioned a lot of these factors, and I think most of them that she mentioned, I would concur with. But apart from just employees, also if you're in the manufacturing, so there could be a consumer dispute. So at every step, there can be something which you could do incorrectly or you could do correctly. If you do it correctly, your path to success would be faster. So I think, yes, it's very, very important. And today's scenario, especially, I think we don't have and the new generation also, there is a urge to get there quicker. So if legal literacy can be taken in from the beginning as something to be looked at very seriously, it would help the organization, definitely.
Thanks for sharing that view, Meghna. I'll go to Zameer Nathani at this point. Zameer, recently there were a lot of disputes, two kinds. NHI contracts being bid out to contractors and then end department disputes. Secondly, what happened is a lot of private companies getting into transportation business and other allied businesses and then ending up disputes with the government. Do you think the role of lawyers and legal literacy in companies becomes more important when you enter into contracts with the government, be it making highways, be it running metro trains, be it doing these kind of projects where PPP is involved, or be it the hybrid annuity model or the PPP model? In any model, when contracts are being made, the management should understand law so that you don't enter into big legal troubles later, which takes the whole company down.
I completely agree with you, and I have been part of that reality check where just 4 months back I won an arbitration against the government by a government suggested arbitrator, ex-Chief Justice of Bombay High Court. Within 4 months, he has given an award in my favor. Is because the legal contract was quite clear on the interpretation part of it. Rest is, I think, on the part of merit discussion, which happened on the other side, but I got a favorable judgment. Number two is that I recently had a similar interaction at a big level with the government, and we were negotiating an MOU. And believe me, their contract, which was sent to us, was completely on a track mode when it went back from us. And we had a discussions on the point whether there will be a bridge in the gap. And at certain point of time, you're very attracted to the government contracts. But point is that this handshake can become a subject matter of a legal dispute at a later stage. You will not believe the previous award when I spoke about, where the arbitrator has given within 4 months an award in my favor. I had a bank guarantee of crores of rupees, which was stuck up with the government just because there was a unilateral stand which was taken. So, it looked very handshake. It looked a very great marriage at the point of time in 2017. But by 2019-20, the marriage looked to be sort of a divorce, whereas there was no alimony which was available. But thankfully, I think the law is in place. So I had a reality check on that. Number two is that, today the management is quite conscious. It's not about only entering into a contract with government. As you said, 2G made a difference. But the better difference came from the Companies Act of 2014. When the new Companies Act came, where the directors were also liable. I remember I was head legal for Balaji Telefilms, Ekta Kapoor, and I started making board presentations because the board wanted to know what are the types of litigation and contingencies where the board can be made responsible. So I think 2G amended Companies Act, where the director's liability was increased. Some investigation by the Serious Fraud Investigation Office, which had earlier investigated Satya. Actions by CCI, Competition Commission of India, which is making an awareness. So overall, from that perspective, I think all contracts with the government should be negotiated properly. And then here there is a set of things which have made the management also conscious about it. And I think today, as a public listed company, I owe that responsibility. And if you audit it strict enough, I think you will have some sanctity to the agreements which you enter with the government. But yes, when you enter into a contract with the government will have some say in that. But take care that you protect your back, because in case the relationship soars up, you are ready to have a favorable order with you.
This is a very important point, because the excitement to get the business by the promoter of the CEO makes them sign contracts which takes the whole company down along with the employees, and also the banks are also in the same kitty of not getting paid back. And there are so many examples in the past 4 or 5 years that it surprises me that how such big wise CEOs and promoters could have taken or signed on such papers when they were bagging these businesses. So I'll go to Seema at this point. Seema, do you think that the excitement or the urge to get a lot of business makes people overlook legal implications sometimes?
All the time. So let's look at the situation of an M&A, a transaction. 70 to 75% of all M&As across world fail. When you're trying to engage, and this is a love story. When the acquirer is now almost in love with the transaction, he has the tendency, and we deal with such stories almost like very, very regularly. What happens is, when the acquirer is so keen to come and take over the transaction, a lot of legal pitfalls, whether it is non-compliances of the past, employee issues, union issues, issues related to licenses, deficiencies, they're all ignored because the love story is so strong in the mind of the acquirer, the founder, that he wants to acquire. And 75% of these M&As fail. What happens? Are you blindsided? Don't you have law firms? Don't you have, massive legal teams in-house? I'm talking about large M&As here. Everything is in place. What happens is you are blindsided by your need and your urge to go forward with the transaction because you're looking at something which is you sold yourself to. You bought a story. This is a similar situation. Now let's take the situation even in a non-M&A situation. The same situation is there for most of the vendors, most of the suppliers. As companies, we have so much of eagerness into jump into the ship of taking the contracts, buying up the contracts, that issues, I'm going to lead you to the issues that are usually ignored. And we were really dealing in a very large transaction recently, and it fell through because of certain issues, but the issues that are usually ignored not by the lawyers of their team, but by the CFOs and the CEOs and the managing directors. Indemnifications, liability, liquidated damages, because they don't think they apply to it, it will never come to pass, and they'll never happen. Termination liabilities, causes of termination, issues related. The commercials don't defeat you. It is the legal, non-attention to the legal consequences of a contract going wrong defeats you. And that's why, as I said, majority of the transactions fall through. What happens in a non-M&A transaction is similar to what happens there, is that your eagerness, your keenness to move forward, you are actually blindsided and you do take these wrong decisions.
Okay, point well taken. Basically, what Seema said is that you tend to overlook legal issues in your hurry to bank business, because I have sat through some meetings where promoters say legal is something, okay, we'll do it. Let's speak business first. Legal, this person can just handle without getting into it. So when the promoter doesn't get into it, that's where the problem starts. I'll go to Meghna. Meghna, we saw in the past 3-4 years, big businesses becoming NPAs, promoters going to jail. And these were really a fine set of promoters and gentlemen who could do no wrong until 5 years ago. Today, many of them are behind bars. Rightly or wrongly, the court will decide. That is not what is our focus. But somewhere, legal issues seem to have been overlooked, or compliances seem to have been ignored. That's why they landed in such a soup. Do you think after these arrests, what we saw in the past 2-3 years, there will be a lot more legal awareness at the promoter and the management level of the importance of legal departments and the compliances going forward for business?
Yes, I definitely think so. And you see, before this trend of the top management also going to jail, or the big people, this was not something that was seen earlier. You have now, people have gone right up to Supreme Court, tried to get relief, not got it. So the fact that the legal ramifications can be this serious, that is something that has gone home pretty strongly. And therefore, I think while you may be very eager to go ahead with a project or sign a contract, you need to understand at each step what is it that a failure to do X would result in. And that ramification in the long term, do you see yourself sitting in the NCLT because you've defaulted? Can there be criminal proceedings initiated? So at each stage, and that's where I think the legal awareness, the legal department, whether you engage with a law firm or you have an in-house department that first looks it through. And like Tarun, who shared, the whole concept that legal was just something that to be done on the side, that, okay, this is just to draw up the papers. It is no longer like that, because I think there are so many steps which are enumerated, and the pitfall could be from the very beginning. And since we are a litigation firm, we see this all the time. At the tender stage itself, that you could be in court when who was L1. So it's not that you really need to wait till the end of it to end up with any litigation. So you need to be very careful, and definitely for the bigger players, you definitely need to have a full-fledged law department. There is no two ways on that.
Zameer, specifically speaking of what I spoke to Meghna, the past 2-3 years when these arrests were made, and a fine set of promoters who were good gentlemen find themselves in big legal troubles now. Some have managed to stay out of jail, but many are not so lucky. Do you think the way with, the importance with which they will look at legal departments going forward, their companies, another set of CEOs will be completely different from now on after what's happened in the past 4-5 years?
Yeah. I mean, not only 4-5 years, I think 10 years down the line, things have become pretty strict. So I'll give you just my example of 2002, Eureka was one of the best companies, best managed, legally compliant, things going good. LG Electronics was good. Then came Reliance. 2006 to 2008, I would look out for an opportunity to tell the auditor that there is some non-compliance we need to put in place. I think then onwards, we were on a crusade because see, compliance was very important because you were collaborating with US companies. At that point of time, because of the Enron issue, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act had come into place. Number two, SEC investigations were on. Now, when you're signing contracts with Goldman Sachs, etc., when you're negotiating with Microsoft, etc., somewhere down the line, you need to have sanctity in the system because this may not go out well in the long term. So 2008 onwards, we were on that drive. At every forum, we would speak on the compliance part of it. Business is very important. We are not compromising business. But certain clauses, like for example, today in sales, when you see the ROs which are signed, we earlier used to see that, these ROs were quite fraudulent. You may have big companies like Unilever. You may have one RO signed by the sales officer of the company of some other company. The same guy signing on behalf of the company and committing a fraud. All right. So this was going on rampant. Once the 10 years back, I have seen the trend changing, and I can make a statement now that not anymore any promoter goes without taking a legal advice. Last 5 years down the line, I have seen every promoter. My experience with Reliance, Balaji Telefilms, Raymond, when the Singhania dispute happened on the property, etc., and present company, I have seen not a single promoter going without a legal advice while running the company on a corporate governance part or any issues which are arising in which are critical issues which are arising, or there are government business contracts where legal is now part of that particular discussions with the government itself, when even the commercial part is going on. That's what I've seen. What I now figure out for the legal heads or the lawyers of the company or external lawyers is that they are now escalating to the board. So first we came out of the CFO side of it because now we work parallelly and in consensus. Number two, they are escalating to the position of CEOs, president, etc. I myself report to the president of the company. I am now seeing they've been elevated to the board of directors position also, because having a lawyer on your board makes a lot of difference, because somewhere down the line in the discussions of the business presentations, we also need to be conscious about the legal issues as well as competitions issues, etc., etc. So this is where I'm seeing now.
Very good point made that having a lawyer on the board makes a lot of difference. Seema, would you concur?
Absolutely. You hear all the time that these are legal issues. Do not, and these, for example, these are commercial issues. Lawyers are not supposed to speak on it. This is a usual phrase that, you used to hear, that these are not a law firm issue. This is not an in-house counsel issue. This is a commercial issue. The promoter will take a decision. Not anymore. I'm sorry. Because all issues, whether it is commercial or legal, have ramifications in law. It has ramifications in compliances. It has ramifications in actual implementation. So having a lawyer on the board is an absolute must to my mind right now, because at the levels that they're taking decisions, every aspect of their business, whether it is aspect of government relationships or compliances or actual internal compliances and policies, or as simple as, policies related to whistleblowing, policies related to, anti-bribery because you're doing large contracts, policies related to, bribing government servants, and your exposures now under the PMLA Act. All of this has so much of ramification. There is no aspect of business which is not touched by a legal dimension. So it's an absolute must to my mind.
Meghna, I've noted a point in the past few years. You had bureaucrats earlier who, because of their knowledge of law, also used to join as directors on the boards of companies and used to contribute a lot. As my panel tells me, in the past few years, we have seen lawyers taking up that role also. So along with bureaucrats, lawyers are also becoming directors and contributing a lot to governance. Do you think that is the change, that is a big change in the past few years?
No, so definitely, and I think Zameer brought in a very good point, which shows the difference in the perception of by the management of the role of the legal person. See, it is when you say that let the legal person be on the board and he's the director, he has a say. And as Seema has brought out also, all these issues which are there. So Tarun, that just shows a difference in the way things are being approached from the management as well, and the legal perspective, the ramifications at each step. So that is definitely a big change. When 20 years ago, that this was not something that was heard of, but today the legal person does sit at the decision making table, is very, very involved, and if the legal person says a no, so typically, even though you may be really keen, you will not bypass or just say, okay, wo handle kar lega. That whole thing perception has changed, because today I think across the board, everyone understands that these are not the times where things can be just brushed under the carpet. And that is a big change.
So we'll 30 seconds each. I'll take a final round of comment from each of my panelists before we end the show. Zameer, Nathani.
I'll only end up by saying that, one of the top executives of a very top company, without naming it, I was sitting with the CEO of the company, and the CEO had taken a business call to sign an agreement with a software giant in United States. And I had advised on certain terms. We did not follow the terms because the interpretation is that that software giant was much big and it may not happen. And finally, that company was nowhere in the picture at a point of time. And the senior executive said to the CEO, you may not have an understanding, but you were still advised by the guy who had the knowledge and experience. I think you should have thought about it before taking a business call, because you are the CEO of the company and it's expected that you behave responsibly. So I think this is the message I leave for everyone, for management and the boards, that tomorrow we have to act responsibility, more so when we are a public listed company.
Point well taken. Seema, your closing comment?
I think legal training and workshops across the company's systems, that's absolutely important in the day and age. Not every decision has a large impact, but some decisions, reach out and have an impact, which is going to have a lot of liabilities. So workshops, trainings, and internal guidelines. See, a lot of guidelines are there. A large part of the companies have amazing number of policies, but the fact of the reality of the matter is nobody reads them. Even the managers are not aware of them. So when you have the reiterations and repetitiveness of the workshops and training, I think that is something that the businesses have to adopt going forward.
Final comment from Meghna, Mishra.
So just to quickly add, I think look at it holistically, use technology to your advantage. There are lots of online facilities. You can have conferences, you can consult. Like I said earlier, have a retainer. It need not be a full-fledged legal department, but don't ignore the legal aspect. Don't start your business and then repent. Cost of correction can be very high.
Thank you so much. This was a fine panel, Zameer, Seema, Meghna. Thanks for sharing your opinions and the relevance of law and legal awareness at the very top level. I think this discussion will be useful to a lot of upcoming businesses who were not paying attention on compliances, but now realize as they grow, compliances and law shouldn't be ignored. Thank you. Thank you.